Hello, this is Dr. Oz. Today I will be talking about location strategies. All right, so let's start with a case study here. FedEx. FedEx is founded in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1971, and it is headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee. The reason for FedEx to choose Memphis, Tennessee is they consider several different factors, including quantitative and qualitative factors. For example, they consider tax incentives. They consider the location of Memphis, which is in the middle of the United States, the strategic location. And most importantly, maybe the factor that they consider is the weather, because FedEx is known for overnight shipping, and it is very important for them to have minimal weather issues for their airplanes in and out in their central hub. This central hub concept enables the service to more locations with fewer aircraft, enables matching of aircraft flights with package loads, reduce mishandling and delay. And again, FedEx has a revenue of $60 billion and net income of $3 billion. And they have more than 400,000 employees all around the world, literally all around the world, connecting 99% of world's GDP. So they're pretty much every single place in the world in terms of countries. So let's look at the learning objectives and location strategies. One, we will identify the major factors that affect location decisions. Two, we will consider or calculate labor productivity. Then we will use factor rating method, which is a simple method, but it's very handy. And then we will complete break-even analysis graphically and mathematically. Then we'll talk about center of gravity methods. And then we will understand the difference between service and industrial locations analysis. So the strategic importance of location is significant. One of the most important decisions that companies make, because they spend millions, sometimes billions of dollars to build their hub or warehouse, and they want to make sure that these kind of strategic decisions are made great. Otherwise, you cannot just carry $1 billion project in somewhere else. It's going to be costly. And the location is increasing global in nature with the globalization. And there is significant impact on fixed and variable costs. We need to consider the labor costs, material costs, and fixed costs as well when we make a decision. Of course, we need to consider taxes and tariffs and so on. And these decisions are infrequent. These are more C-level decisions, executive level decisions. So what are the strategic importance of the location? We have three different options basically, and we can expand the existing capacities. We can make our facility capacity bigger. We can maintain the existing and add new sites, or we could close existing and relocating it. And the objective is really maximize the profit for the firm, increase the wealth of our company. All right, so let's take a look at the key location decisions and key success factors. One, we need to consider political risks. Government rules, attitudes, and incentives. Those are important things to consider. Two, we need to think about economic issues and cultural issues. Cultural and economic issues. So if country has a strike or economic problems or a high unemployment rate and so on, this is going to impact our performance as well. Location of the market. So is it close to Europe? Is it close to America? Is it close to China? So those kind of big centers, you need to be close to them if you are planning to sell your products to those locations, or if your suppliers are on those locations. Again, I need to understand the labor talent. So I cannot just put my facility wherever I want. I need to consider whether there is labor talent available, whether they are productive, whether the cost structure is good for me. Availability of supplies and communications and energy. So availability of resources is important. Do I have energy resources? Do I have infrastructure? Exchange rates are, believe it or not, so important because you may have a great company, but if the exchange rate works against you, then your cost structure may go higher and that might shrink your profit margin. Or if you're so you're selling some product in euros, and if the value of euro goes down against US dollar, what happens is that your revenue will shrink, and that will decrease your profit margin as well. We can look at the competitive index of countries, and you can go to basically the website called www.weforum.org/reports, and you will see the global competitiveness report, or you can just Google global competitiveness, and you can see the list of countries based on their list competitiveness, and you can see this is 2015 ranking, but I look at the most recent ranking, United States is number 2 now, and they consider different factors to sort these countries, such as education, again, infrastructure, and so on. So factors that affect location decisions. Labor productivity is very important, especially in developed countries. Significant portion of your revenue goes to labor costs. So lower productivity may increase your total cost. But you cannot just think about the cost per hour. We need to think about the labor cost per unit. So labor cost per not hour, per unit can be calculated by labor cost per day, or whatever time frame it is, labor cost per day divided by productivity. Productivity. What do I mean by productivity? I mean units produced per day. Let's do an example. Say, look at South Carolina versus Mexico. All right, so in this example, assume that it cost me $70 per day to hire someone in South Carolina. It cost me only $25 per day to hire someone in Mexico. And imagine that in this example, I can produce 60 units in a day. And in Mexico, I can produce only 20 units in a day. As you see, Mexico is cheaper per day in comparison to South Carolina, but the productivity is really 1/3. So if you look at this ratio, you will see that it will cost you $1.17 per unit. And here it will cost you $1.25 per unit. So as you see, South Carolina is cheaper when you consider the productivity, although you pay more money per employee. Again, this is a single factor analysis. We need to consider other factors as well, such as capital, and technology, and machinery, and so on. But if you just consider labor costs, you see the difference here, right? So factors that affect location decisions, we talk about exchange rates, we talk about currency risk, and costs. We need to consider two different types of costs. One, tangible, two, intangible. Tangible ones are easy to measure. So these are like utilities, taxes, labor, and so on. And intangible ones are harder to calculate. These are including education, public transportation, community, quality of life, and so on. All right. So location decisions based on cost alone can create difficult ethical issues. So some companies had that issue of going to some countries that poor labor conditions and child labor and so on. And that impacts the society, that impacts the publicity, and that's not a good thing for a company in the long run. And also another thing to consider is corruption. There's corruption index. Again, it's 2015, but you can find most recent data, and you can list the countries based on corruption. And corruption is something that we need to be careful about before we choose our location in a certain country. So we see some clustering of companies in certain locations. For example, winemaking companies, they go Napa Valley or Bordeaux in France. The reason is that, of course, the climate and natural resources, land, and so on. Software firms, we see that they are in Silicon Valley, Boston, Bangalore, Israel, and so on. The reason is that the talent is in those locations, like bright graduates and scientific technical areas, venture capitalists nearby, and so on. And when you look at the theme parks, Disney World, Universal Studios, SeaWorld, you see that they're located in Orlando, Florida. Why? Because it's a hot spot for entertainment, it's warm weather, you see tourists and inexpensive labor, and so on. And when you look at electronics firms, you see North Mexico is a great location. Again, you see here the North American Free Trade Agreement effect, and you see taxes, and you think those kind of things are impacting those location selections for companies. Computer hardware manufacturers, you see them in Singapore, Taiwan, again, high technological penetration rate and GDP per capita and skilled educated force, labor force, and so on. So there are different companies, they choose different locations based on different reasons. I would like to talk about factor rating method, which is easy to use. There are 6 steps, but it's very commonly used and it's important too. Basically, first what we do is develop a list of relevant factors called key success factors. We just list them. What are the key factors? And then we give assigning weight to each of them. The more important one will, of course, get a better, higher weight. And then we will scale each factor. And then once we scale it, we score each location. We put our alternative 1, alternative 2, alternative 3, and so on. And for each weight, we will give them scores. And then we will multiply the score by the weights and then make a recommendation based on this analysis. So let's take a look at an example here. So in this example, I have key success factors here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could have more, you could have less. And we could ask expert opinions. We can use our experience. We can collect some data. That's the beautiful part of this approach. You can get data from different sources, primary or secondary data collection. Let's say the labor availability has the weight factor of 25% or 0.25. People to car ratio has 0.05. And per capita income is 0.1, it's 10%. Tax structure, 39%. And education and health is 21%. When you add them up, you will get 100%. All right, so let's give scores to each country. We are comparing here France and Denmark. Again, we could have more countries here, or zip codes, or cities, and so on. 70, France is better than Denmark. 50, 60, Denmark is better here. 85, 80, France slightly better. 75, 70 again, France is slightly better. 60, 70, and Denmark is better here. And when I multiply the weight factors with their corresponding scores, for example, here, weighted score for France would be 0.25 times 70, which is 17.5. If I do the same math for Denmark, I would get 15. Here I would get 2.5. Looks like it doesn't have that much impact. 3, 8.5, 8. This is an important factor. Looks like tax structure 29.3 versus 27.3. And here we see 12.6 and we see 14.7. When I add these weighted scores, I got for France 70.4, and for Denmark I got 68. UP, I got the result here. The best country here between these two is France based on my my weights and scores. All right, so let's look at locational cost volume analysis. This is another important method. And we look at economic comparison of locational alternatives. There are 3 steps. Step number 1, determine fixed and variable costs for each location. Plot the cost for each location. Select location with lowest total cost for expected production volume. So let's do an example here as well. So imagine we are selling a product and the selling price is $120 per unit. And expected volume, we are expected to sell is 2,000 units. And I have 3 cities in this example to compare: Athens, Brussels, and Lisbon. And I need to look at fixed costs, I need to look at variable cost, and I will finally calculate the total cost. So fixed cost in Athens is $30,000, and for Brussels, $60,000, and in Lisbon, $110,000. When we look at the variable cost, it cost me $75 per unit in Athens, and in Brussels, it cost me $45 per unit, and Lisbon, $25 per unit. So I can calculate my total cost for Athens, fixed cost plus variable cost, which is 30,000 fixed cost plus expected volume is 2,000 times $75 per unit. This would give me 150 plus 30, $180,000 total cost. If I do the same math for Brussels, I got 150,000. And for Lisbon, I got $160,000. And based on this fixed and variable costs, I can say the best option is Brussels. All right. So now I would like to find the crossover points between these locations. So the crossover point between Athens and Brussels, whenever these 2 equations are equal, that's the crossover point. So I will calculate total cost for Athens and total cost for Brussels. Whenever they are equal, that's the crossover point. So I know total cost for Athens, fixed cost, 30,000, plus variable cost, which is $75, times X. This is the unit produced, which I don't know. I will find a break-even point. X is equal to fixed cost for Brussels is $60,000 plus the variable cost is $45 per unit times X. So if I find the value of X here, it is 1,000 units. That's the crossover point. Let's calculate crossover point for Brussels and Lisbon. Again, total cost for Brussels is, I will just copy from here, 60,000 fixed cost plus the variable cost of $45 per unit. X is equal to fixed cost in Lisbon is given as 110,000 plus the variable cost is given as $25 per unit times X. So when I find X from here, that is 2,500 units. Okay, so I found 2 crossover points. Now I can draw my graph, and from this graph you can easily tell which line is which location. So you can look at the y-intercept right here, 30,000. That should give you fixed cost. The fixed cost of Athens. Right, fixed cost of Athens is 30,000. So this line, light blue line, is corresponding to Athens. And if you look at this y-intercept, 60,000, that is Brussels fixed cost. So this is the line for Brussels. And when I look at the finally, this fixed cost 110, this is Lisbon. All right. So now we calculate the crossover point between Brussels and Athens as 1,000 right here. This is the crossover point. And the crossover point between Brussels and Lisbon, we calculate as 2,500 units. This is the crossover point right here. So what does this one tell me? So right here in this area from 0 till 1,000, this is where Athens gives me the lowest cost. Lowest cost. And between 1,000 and 2,500 units, the lowest cost is dark blue line, which is Brussels. And more than 2,500 units, I will go with Lisbon because it's the lowest cost. Again, if I'm not sure about the quantity for the future, I can think about this way. Crossover points, if I'm expecting to have higher sales volumes in the future, I will rather go with Brussels. If I expect lower, Athens. If I expect something in the middle, Brussels is the best option. Now I would like to talk about another location method, choosing a location method, which is center of gravity. So here we are trying to find a location that minimizes the distribution costs, and we consider the location of markets, we consider volume of goods shipped to those markets, and finally we consider here shipping costs. Could be distance as well. In general, shipping cost is the function of the distance and the weight. So it's ton mile or ton kilometer or so on. All right. So center of gravity is basically you are using this formula and this formula here for the y-axis. So basically, you look at the quantity of goods moved from that location I, multiply their corresponding x-axis values, and divide them by the summation of the quantity, and do the same thing for the y. So let's look at an example. Here, you can see the shipments. Store location Chicago, 2,000, 1,000 for New York and Pittsburgh, and 2,000 for Atlanta. So based on these quantities, now I can create my center of gravity method. Again, I choose an arbitrary origin, and I put that one as a 0, 0. And then I locate my locations from that arbitrary location. As you see here, Chicago is x-axis value 30, 120 north, and this could be miles and so on. And you can see 4 locations. And each of these locations have different quantities. For example, quantity 1 is for Chicago, 2,000 units that we learn here, 2,000 units, okay? Now I can calculate the center of gravity for x coordinate. I will multiply the x values for location 1, 30, times 2,000 units, plus location 2, x coordinates value 90 times 1,000 units, plus location 3, x value is 130 times quantity, which is 1,000, plus 60 location 4, x-axis value times 2,000 units, divided by all the quantities. In this case, I have 2,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 2,000. And if I do this math, I get 66.7. I will do exact same thing for y coordinate. Again, this time I'm not looking x values, I will look at the y values, 120 y value for Chicago, times the quantity is 2,000, plus for 110, which is for Pittsburgh, location number 2, 110 times the quantity, which is 1,000 units, plus location 3, which is 130 y-axis value, which is New York, 130 times the quantity is 1,000 units, plus finally my last location, which is Atlanta. 40 is the y value times quantity is 2,000 again, and divide by 2,000 plus 1,000 plus 1,000 plus 2,000. And when you do the math, you will get the y location of 99.3. All right, so that's the center of gravity right here. 99, we say this is a 99.3. And then it is 66.7 x-axis value. 66.7, comma 3.3. Oh, is it 99.3 or 93.3? That's a good question. I think this is 93.3. All right. So this is done. Center of gravity is pretty simple. So I will put my location right here, which will minimize the distance between all these customer locations, considering the quantity demanded. So let's talk about transportation model. Transportation model is a linear programming and tries to find the best solution for transportation costs. And I have a separate video for that, and I'm going to show you how to use that using Excel Solver. And I would like to show you one example here. Volkswagen parts, basically in Germany, they ship products in and out from different continents. So it takes so much to build a car. You get parts and labor and so on, and then you transfer those products to all around the world. As you see, this is just the illustration. I'm pretty sure this map should be much more complex than that. For service industry, though, you don't care about cost as much. You still do. The most important thing is really revenue generation. And here we look at La Quinta hotels, and they start with 35 independent variables in their regression analysis, and they realize that these 4 factors impact the most, and 51% of the variation in their dependent variable profitability can be explained by these 4 different factors. So you could conduct your own machine learning algorithm, which is one of the most simple machine learning algorithm would be a simple linear regression, and you could find these factors for your model as well. And also it's important to show geographic information systems to show the transportation costs and distance traveled and modes of transportations and so on. So that's it for this video. Until next video, enjoy supply chain management.